Well, I think right across Europe, there's considerable concern over the last number of days and last couple of weeks about the assertion by President Trump that he wants to acquire Greenland. I think it's welcome that clarification has now been given, that he intends to pursue a peaceful approach to this, but nonetheless, he's resolute about that. That's serious, and it's something that the European Union and Ireland being part of that are mindful that this is a very significant departure from what would be normal diplomatic links between allies that have been working together around security of the US and Europe really since the Second World War. I think those that have followed President Trump since his re-election and indeed even through his previous presidency would know that he tends to campaign in a level of hype. He certainly uses social media and makes very significant pronouncements. Sometimes he changes his mind or he moderates his approach. So I firmly believe that Europe should not overreact. I think they're rightly concerned. They're discussing the issues collectively. And I think we've got to pursue a diplomatic approach, whilst at the same time being resolute and effectively say that if there's going to be very significant tariffs that impact negatively on Irish goods exported into the United States, we should have a response. And that response was developed previously and it's still there. Mm-hmm. But when it comes to the more sort of pronouncements about landing rights, closing bases and all of that, I think that discussion I think it's unnecessary at this stage. Of course, all of those options remain available to individual member state governments in the event of failure to reach a suitable agreement to all sides here. But I think we need to dial down the rhetoric. I think we need to engage with President Trump. I think he has identified the concerns around security and the necessity or the sort of centrality of Greenland in terms of protecting the US and Europe. And I think there are ways in which that can be done cooperatively through NATO and in concert with other militarily aligned states in Europe. I don't think I know it doesn't require the acquisition or the annexing of Greenland from Denmark. Ireland has made it very clear, as Europe has, that it would be entirely unacceptable for the US or any country to seek to annex or take over or invade Greenland or any other member state's territory or member state indeed. But I think the engagement is, in the first instance, diplomatic, and I think we will engage on that front.
And just to reference a point that you mentioned there, the idea that Trump often overstates his intentions, or that acronym TACO, Trump always chickens out. It has been noted that the US bombed 7 countries last year, so that's 7 countries since since Trump resumed office following the last election. So is the threat not heightened in this instance, and is the Irish government acting or preparing accordingly?
Yeah, I think there's no doubt that the US now and previously, under previous presidents, also acted unilaterally and sometimes as part of coordinated ally missions into countries where they sought to destabilize existing regimes. That's a feature that's been around before, so there's nothing particularly new about that. But I think the rhetoric here and the stated intention to effectively take Greenland against the wishes of the Kingdom of Denmark and against the wishes of the people of Greenland is a departure way beyond anything we have seen in the past. But I would refer to it as, at this stage, a stated position that may ultimately just be rhetoric. I think Europe has a responsibility to treat it seriously, but at the same time engage diplomatically, because it may be possible for both the US and Europe to have both their objectives secured: A, that the integrity of the borders of Denmark and its island of Greenland, albeit an autonomous island of Greenland, that be protected, and the US still being able to have a protection cover against what they see as the threats of Russia and China. It should be noted that if this were to be allowed to happen, it would render useless a lot of the efforts that have been made to deter Russia further advances into Ukraine, because you're really only following a similar path. And I think that's why we've got to be really careful and cautious here. But I wouldn't want to dial it up. I think President Trump, does politics as he does it, and that's his business. I think we have a responsibility at the European level to engage constructively, but in a determined way, clearly making, as the diplomats have, clearly recognizing that there is no place in international diplomacy for this covetous approach. But I wouldn't want us to be dialing up the rhetoric. The engagement is only just starting to take place, I believe, in Davos today. Perhaps that there will be some meetings on the periphery of that will discuss some of the issues. I think it's a long way to go in this, and I think we've got to be careful that we don't seem to overreact and poke further ire from the Trump administration. I think we've got to be cautious, careful, whilst being absolutely resolute that the stated ambition of the annexation of Greenland is not acceptable, will not be acceptable, and will be, if it was to be attempted to be effected, will be met with a very robust deterrent and opposition from a European perspective.
And just on that deterrent and returning to this call from the Labour Party for the government to ban the US military from using Shannon Airport, if we'll call it a conflict, but or if the tensions escalate, if there is military force used against Greenland, a member of NATO, or the territory belonging to a member of NATO, being Denmark, could the government in good conscience continue to allow the US military to use Shannon Airport?
I think we've to be very careful that we don't hype anything here. I think the recognition of the Irish government and European governments around its citizens, it's about recognising that we have a very positive relationship with the United States. We have economic links and ties that are fundamental to the economic success of this country. So we're not going to do anything, we're not going to ratchet anything that would effectively have a massive negative impact on the lives and livelihoods of our citizens. The relationship that we have with the United States puts bread on the table of so many families across Clare and across the country. So in recognition of that, the centrality of our relationship with the United States is of paramount importance. So it's about trying to find a diplomatic solution here. And I don't want to add fuel to the flames by starting to pick off things we might or might not do. What we have to do is find a way to de-escalate the current situation. It's a way to find a pathway that both blocs can find a pathway through here, because the interconnectedness of the relationship between Europe and the United States, the interconnectedness between the relationship from Ireland and the United States from an economic point of view, which is responsible for the healthy state of our economy, cannot be overstated. So we have a fundamental responsibility to the Irish people that we manage this in a way that doesn't have a catastrophic effect on our economy, and we will do that. And in doing that, we've got to kind of reduce some of the rhetoric and the language. And I understand from opposition politicians, they can pose questions, and that's fine. But the government has a responsibility in a very different quarter, and has anything that they might say or not say has the potential for very negative consequence. And we don't want to do anything that will undermine the viability of our economy, whilst at the same time making it very clear as a statement of fact that we don't support, we won't support, and we will react if there's any attempt to invade or annex Greenland, or instill any negative on the bloc that is the European Union.
And just a final question to you on this, Timmy, because there is discussion at an EU level about a potential response to any escalation in this matter, whether that be relating to tariffs, trade, or indeed other measures. In that conversation, it's not implausible that there could be a directive that EU member states deny access to the US military when it comes to their airports, landing strips or airspace, if such a directive was to be issued, or even if there was a NATO recommendation of a measure like that. Would Ireland comply with it?
All the focus right now is on trying to find an outcome here that doesn't undermine the economic ties that we have between the two blocs and between Ireland and the United States in particular. President Trump has indicated an escalation of the tariffs on European products into the European Union. He hasn't identified Ireland, but that may change. And we're trying to find a way to de-escalate that in a manner that continues that link. So what the European Union has said, and had prepared a package of very significant counter tariffs if that was the approach the American administration took a number of months ago. We moved beyond that, and we found a good landing zone, I believe. I think we've got to work towards that, and I certainly don't believe that either the Irish government or any other administration across Europe should be trying to go outside of what has already been identified, which is an escalation of the tariffs. And I think that's where we need to focus our attention, be resolute and strong in that we're going to protect Denmark and Greenland, and be prepared, if necessary, to deploy a response based on an increase in tariffs on goods heading from Europe into the United States. That if that eventuality were to materialise, that we would have a package of measures that would equally put pressure on the US economy against the importation of products from there. What I'd ultimately like to see is that we de-escalate all of this. We share so much in common. We share a desire to protect both Ireland and Europe against the threat from Russia and other nefarious actors. But we do so collectively rather than in isolation or in a unilateral way. So I think there's a long way to go in this. I think there's, as always, there's an opportunity for a diplomatic approach. And that has really been the strength of Ireland's position always. We've always done so from being non-militarily aligned, from a position of neutrality, albeit that we have very close ties with the United States. And I'd be hopeful that we can focus minds now in the coming days and try to bring some certainty to this. Because when allies tend to be at loggerheads, the only ones that gain in that are our enemies. And the European Union and the United States are not enemies. But Russia, for sure, is an enemy of both the US and the European Union. And I think we need to get back working collaboratively together to face the very significant threat that is Russia, that is Iran, and that is those stateless actors that operate under the brands of ISIS and various different other entities. And that's where we need to focus our attention now.